We have talked about the grid, the guides, and now it's time to look at another feature that's complementary to these two, but that goes beyond them as well: snapping. Snapping is new in Krita 3, and it does what the name suggests. Krita snaps the cursor to precise location based on a few parameters. These parameters are accessed with the Shift-S key combination. You can click on anything to toggle it on and off based on the checkmark in the little checkbox. For instance, if I click on bounding box, I'm going to deactivate it. You have quite a few options in there. The first two correspond to the grid and the guides, quite simply. The 5 options in the middle, orthogonal, node, extension, intersection, and bounding box, are exclusive to vectors right now, and the last two work with the document, the image bounds, and the image center. So let me run you through the functionality it provides. Let's start with the grid. The snapping works with the selection tool, the shape drawing tools mainly, and vectors right now. It also works with transforming layers, but it's limited at the moment. You can basically snap the corners of your transform when you are scaling, and the center of a selection with the move tool. So it's only the center of the layer that's going to snap to a grid line. May not be very visible right now, but when I'm moving near a grid line, the image is actually snapping to it, and you can see how it only moves horizontally right there. Now, when it comes to snapping to the grid, it's quite simple. You can snap to lines and intersections as well. The intersection of two lines will actually snap with your cursor. You can use that to draw any kind of shape or to place guides as well. If you draw a guide out of a ruler, it will snap to the grid lines that way. So you can use the grid to place guides and then hide the grid and remove grid snapping to only work with a few reference lines. For instance, in that case, I'm going to activate snap to grid, and I have a vertical margin for my document in that case. You'll notice one thing: the guides are actually snapping to the grid, although the grid is not visible. You don't need either the guides or the grid to be visible for snapping to work. This is a very flexible system. Next up are the image bounds and the image center. I'm going to activate them only. Image bounds is quite straightforward. You can see that my cursor and my selection is going to snap to the top, left, right, and bottom edges of my document. Quite straightforward. Now we have the image center. The image center does not only correspond to the image's center point, it's actually the middle line vertically and horizontally that are concerned in that case. It works with both the horizontal and vertical lines that cut the document in the middle. The snapping to the grid is deactivated in that case. I only have the image center active, and you can see that my guides end up right in the middle of the document. The image center option is not represented visually on the document, but you can just snipe guides there to divide your document in half, both vertically and horizontally, like I've done in here, which is quite handy as well. Next, let us talk about the richest part of the snapping tool in Krita, which is vector. This is really where it shines. I'm going to deactivate the snapping options in there to start with. And in order to show you how it works, I have to create a new vector layer. You can do that right in the Layers Docker by clicking on the little arrow next to Insert a new paint layer, and you have to choose Vector Layer or press the V key. In Krita, vectors work quite similarly to regular layers. The difference is that you cannot use all the tools. You have to use a shape drawing tool, so the line, rectangle, ellipse, polygon, polyline, and Bezier curve or freehand path tool. I'm going to do just that. When you draw on the canvas, Krita will draw a vector shape. You can then use the tools at the top of the toolbox that are dedicated to vectors to modify your shape. for instance, I can create a rounded box. That's just so you have a little background on vectors in Krita. I'm going to create a shape that snaps to the guides, and maybe a smaller one down there, so we have two shapes to work with for reference. The first vector-exclusive snapping option is orthogonal. Orthogonal is a bit like Photoshop's smart guides. It allows you to align your selection or the shape you are drawing with the projection of the vector's object's bounding box. That is to say, imagine that on the corners of my rectangles, the lines are actually being projected to infinity and beyond. You can see that when I'm drawing a box, it aligns with the edges of my shape. It also works with a circle in that case. You can see that I can align the corner of my ellipse and even the top edge with the bounding box of my rectangle. Just to show you that it's with the bounding box, if I draw another ellipse below, it will align with the bottom edge of the bounding box of the first ellipse. The second option is node. A vector node is just one of your vector's control points. I'm going to create a polygon in that case, and I'll show you the nodes. If I select that node selection tool, you can see them right here. These are the corner points that define the polygon. So when you pick the node snapping option, when you create a new shape, it will automatically snap to those points on any other shape. It also works obviously with the Bezier curve or something like the freehand path tool. I have a vector path in here. I'm going to take a look at where the corner points are. And if I draw a shape, my cursor should snap to this little point. It's snapping right here, for instance. Next up is the extension. And this one is quite special. If I draw a shape that's open, it only works with open shapes, and I leave an ending point right there. Look at that. Krita creates a projected line, and this is your extension. Whenever I put my cursor near that projected line, this is the tangent of the last point of my path in that case, Krita snaps to it. And it works the same in there. So the node option, but this one as well, can allow you to quickly cap an open vector shape. Next is intersection. Intersection, quite straightforward. If I move my shape around here, I'm going to change its color in the tool option so it's quite visible that way. So you can see that the two boxes are intersecting. I can quite simply drag a line, and you can see that my cursor snaps to the intersection points, the place where the two shapes interlock. And we have one last option, which is bounding box. Again, very straightforward. It just means if I add a few ellipses in here, and I draw a vector shape, it will snap to the bounding box of that ellipse. So it's only the bounding box. Contrary to the orthogonal option, it doesn't get projected to infinity. And that's it for the general use of snapping in Krita. I'm going to make 2 example videos next to show you how we can use that in practice. But at least you've got an overview of the possibilities.